Hey guys, great to see you again. This is part 2. I know it cut off last time, so we're going to back it up a little bit and continue on with the rest of this chapter and into the next. Here we go. Again, we're doing Refuge Recovery, a Buddhist Path to Recovering from Addiction by Levine. And thank you, Kimberly Rex, for letting me borrow this book while we're here. Once we understand this, we can begin to determine whether or not we have crossed the line into addiction by looking at all the ways that our drug use, drinking, eating, gambling, sex, or relationships have become a source of suffering. This is a process that cannot be skipped or half-assed. The foundation of our recovery is a complete admission and acceptance of the suffering that we have caused and experienced due to addiction. We must do away with any shred of denial, minimization, justification, or rationalization. To recover, we must completely and totally understand and accept the truth that addiction creates suffering. As addicts, we have crossed a line we can rarely cross back over. Drug addicts and alcoholics almost never again regain the ability to drink or use drugs in a non-addictive way. We have to accept that abstinence is our only hope. In parentheses, it says, for those who have become addicted to food or certain unhealthy behaviors related to food, however, total abstinence is not an option. Recovery entails abstaining from the addictive behaviors associated with eating to find a balanced relationship to food. There is a small percentage of former addicts who, after a period of abstinence and recovery, seem to be able to return to drinking or drugs without losing control. But this is a rare exception. The vast majority of addicts will return to active addiction if they participate in the behaviors or substances that they become addicted to in the past. I want to take a pause here and just to add a personal reality. When I read this, I understood that I've had the 8 relapses. It's 8, but I say 5 because taking a hit of my former drug, like one smoke, didn't seem like a full relapse, but I know it is in some circles. But to get to the point is that it was, for me, every time I went to California, not this last time though, high five for me, but it was people, places, and things. But I did note that in the 3 years since Father's Day of 2017 to now, those relapses occurred when I would go back to Cali. And it wasn't like, it'd be like, I took a hit this time, or if 2 days later, because I was still there, I take it, whatever. And it was the only time I did a full, clearly messed up, can't even front. It was a 5-day stretch, was because I was driving from Arizona to California to Seattle and then back. And so that was 5 days of use. That was obviously the worst of the relapses. But I used it to drive. I know. Some of you are right there shaking your head. But the reality of the situation is every time I left and came back to Arizona, where I was in different places in Arizona, that pipe was gone. That shit was not on me. And one time that I did bring stuff back with me, I did the most undrug addict thing ever. And I threw it away. And for a drug addict of 14 years like I was on meth, to have had enough, because my friend at the time gave me more than I bought for, because they were worried about me driving back all these hours without having had sleep. And so here I was with this great abundance, and the closer I got to my destination, my new home, my new way of being, I was surrounded by the new people and the new things that I did. I was horrified, pulled over and threw that shit away. Any drug addict knows, for a former 14 consistent everyday user to have a pipe and a lot of drugs, most of them for free, and to just throw it away, spoke to me. And for whoever this personal revelation is, I hope that it helps not make you realize that, oh yeah, then I can use whenever. No. What I realized, people, places, and things will make you slip back. And because I was in a very small percentage, apparently, that realized that if I forgave myself for the slip, and I was not going to bring it into my new life, into my new places, into my new people, into my new things that I had around me. So when you have a slip, do not beat yourself up. Just recognize, was it the people, places, and things? Was it that? And remember not to bring that into new people, places, and things, or that old behavior will eat up that neighborhood and those people, and it'll get ugly because that's what it does. It kills, destroys, and tries to kill. It just harms. It steals things from you. So I just wanted to share that little bit, and to recognize that the reason I was able to not go back into all those addictions, 5-8 slips in 3 years' time, I'm very proud of myself. And to me, I use it as a reality check that, man, it wasn't so much that you used, Jeannette, it's that you didn't bring it back with you. You said, no, wait, no. That was people, places, and things there. This is not how I'm going to care for myself now. Okay, sorry for that rant. Felt necessary for whatever reason, and God bless whoever needed to hear that, if you needed to hear that. There is a small percentage of former addicts who, after a period of abstinence or recovery, seem to be able to return to drinking or drugs without losing control. But this is a rare exception. The vast majority of addicts will return to active addiction if they participate in the behaviors or substance that they become addicted to in the past. Because, yeah, this is why I cannot go home, apart from the fact that they don't want me there. The fact is that if I was back in the same situation, the same people, the same place, the same things, of course I'm going to become an addict again. But I know that, so I don't go home. Accepting that we are addicts is also accepting that we can no longer drink or use drugs or go home, depending, I guess, on where you're at in your self-discovery journey. Accepting that we are addicts is also accepting that we can no longer drink or use drugs. When we bring awareness to the addiction and all the suffering it has caused, we begin a process of recovery that will always include abstinence. In the beginning, it can be hard to imagine our lives without the drugs or behaviors that bring us temporarily relief from the difficulties in our lives. But later, after we have firmly established the recovery practices, it will be hard to imagine a life that includes addiction. So obviously why I'm reading this book right along with you. But later, after we have firmly established the recovery practices, it will be hard to imagine a life that includes addiction. That is my goal. The meditation, ethical behavior, and community involvement that accompany the Buddhist path to recovery will lead to an experience of such contentment and well-being that there will no longer even be an attraction to escaping or creating a false, temporary intoxication. Praise be. The practice of these principles, which begin with accepting the reality of our addiction, will bring us to an enlightened state, an experience of wisdom and compassion and forgiveness and love for ourselves and everyone else. When we experience this healing, the drive to escape and or control our experience will be replaced by a deep appreciation of life as it is. As compassion grows in our hearts, pain will no longer be so scary or something to escape from. Instead, it will turn into just another sensation or emotion to feel and to meet with kindness, as I did when I had my slips, my relapses. We will once again be able to enjoy the life that we live, with the normal joys and sorrows that come with birth and death. First, truth inventory. Write an in-depth and detailed inventory of the suffering you have experienced in association with your addiction. Share the inventory with a trusted friend, a mentor, or your Buddhist teacher to understand the nature of your addiction/suffering. On the path of recovery, we must understand that addiction is suffering and accept all the ways that it has caused suffering in our lives. Only when we can begin to find freedom from addiction without full acceptance and disclosure, recovery is not possible. We cannot skip this step. We must be thorough in our inventory process. I'm going to go back here a little bit. Share the inventory with a trusted friend. Okay. Write an in-depth and detailed inventory of the suffering you have experienced in association with your addiction. I imagine that that would include, and as I will be writing this down, will include the fact that addiction didn't just pop out of nowhere. It was a cause and effect issue. And there was causes that caused the effect of me being a drug addict. So I just want to throw that in, part of your inventory from what my intuition is telling me. You have to recognize and write down what it was that led you to addiction. And then everything else after that, you have to take responsibility for and name the things that in your inventory that were affected by our choice to be addicts. This inventory is designed to help the addict acknowledge and accept all the ways that he or she has caused and experienced suffering. It is through the process of understanding, acknowledging, and admitting suffering that we can begin to transform our relationship with suffering and begin to find liberation from it. Answer each question in depth and detail. It is best to use a notebook dedicated solely for this process. The inventory is also available in worksheet format at www.refugerecovery.org. So the name of the book with a www in front of it and an org at the end after the period there. Suffering is the stress created by craving for more. List the stress your addiction has created. How did it manifest day to day, moment to moment? So, of course, pause this, and I'll read the question again. Pause this now, and then go get your pen and paper, go. And you're back. Okay. Suffering is the stress created by craving for more. List the stress your addiction has created. How did it manifest day to day, moment to moment? Question mark. That's 1. 2. Suffering is never having enough to feel satisfied. Question is, how did you suffer from dissatisfaction? First thing that popped into my mind is, my mama didn't love me enough. Suffering, this is 3. Suffering is stealing to support your addiction. Did you steal? From whom? Make a thorough inventory of your theft. Number 4. Suffering is lying to hide your addiction. When did you start lying about your addiction? What is blatant? Did you minimize your addiction or omit any detail? Whom have you lied to? And what is the extent of your dishonesty? That's a lot of questions. I'm going to reel that back in and say it again. Remember, just keep pausing the button until you get these down. Suffering is lying to hide your addiction. When did you start lying about your addiction? Was it blatant? Did you minimize your addiction or omit any details? Whom have you lied to? And what is the extent of your dishonesty? Next, suffering is feeling ashamed of one's actions. List all the ways you have felt ashamed or guilty about your actions. And I'm going to add this helpful hint, I hope. I thought I was real slick. And in a lot of ways, I had lots of proof that I was. Because I had a lot of people trust me through my addiction. I was a blue-collar tweaker, did a lot of work. And so I thought I was real slick because a lot of people probably just weren't paying enough attention, or I didn't have enough time around them. They actually went, or they had no experience with the addict, so they didn't know I was high. But in retrospect, after speaking to people since then and talking to people that I used to talk to before, here and there, they have said, oh yeah, Jeannette, we knew you were high. So in this inventory, make that a possibility and a reality of the situation where you might think, maybe you thought you were hella slick with lots of folks, but I want you to just contemplate the idea of like, what if they knew? Because they probably did or do. That will bring up some shame. That will bring up some self-mirroring that you're going to have to stare at and go, oh shit. They knew. Oh my God. Yeah. So if you're having some problems getting some of these questions to surface up in a truthful way, try looking at it in the paradigm that they knew, and see what happens. Maybe that will be of help. Suffering is feeling ashamed of one's actions. List all the ways you have felt ashamed or guilty about your actions. Next question. Suffering is feeling unworthy. Has unworthiness affected you? In what way? In what ways? Okay, that was 6. Question number 7. Suffering is living in fear of the consequences of one's actions. Did fear of getting caught affect your life? How? 8. Suffering is the feelings of anger and resentment. Make a detailed list of everyone whom you have ever been angry, or resentful, towards, and why. It'll probably take a minute. Where was I? 9, I think. Suffering is hurting other people. Make a list of all the people you have hurt and how you hurt them. This is going to be confusing for me. I can tell you that right now, personally. Because of how much suffering I was in and sifting through due to a lot of abuse in multiple ways that came crashing down. At the end of my addiction, I was so out of my head for so many reasons that I was just stuck in victim mode. Yep, I was. So, that's going to be a difficult question to answer for me. Suffering is hurting other people. Make a list of all the people you have hurt and how you had hurt them. Suffering is hurting yourself. List all the ways you hurt yourself. Are the next ones. Oh, excuse me. What I meant is like suffering is a feeling of anger and resentment. That's why I told you that little tale right now. Of where I was at the end of my addiction. Because yeah, I was in resentment and a lot of anger for a lot of injustice and a lot of lack of support. And I was like, I would never be like unable to help others in this situation. Why is no one there for me? For very good reasons. I was out of my mind, and people are not professionals. You need professionals to help this, or you need to go on a journey like I did to heal yourself. People, places, and things make a difference. You have to break out of your normal. You have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to challenge yourself. And you need to look at the reality that the little box you're stuck in, you're the one that is allowing yourself to be stuck there. Yeah, it takes a lot of courage to bust out of there. Bust out of there, though, please. Okay, so where were we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9. Suffering is hurting other people. Make a list of all the people you have hurt and how you have hurt them. 10. Suffering is hurting yourself. List all the ways you have hurt yourself. I keep messing up my numbers. 1, 2. This is why I suck at math. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so suffering is hurting yourself. List all the ways you have hurt yourself. 11 is suffering is the feeling of being isolated and alone. Did your addiction lead to a feeling of isolation? At the end, where were you all alone in your self-created disconnection? Yes. Sorry. Write about how that felt. I'm going to stop with the numbers because the numbers and me don't get along. So I'll just go next question. I'm going to repeat that last one. Suffering is the feeling of being isolated and alone. Did your addiction lead to a feeling of isolation? Question mark. At the end, were you all alone in your self-created disconnection? Pretty much. Thank you, Corey, for being there. There's a few people that were still there. Write about how that felt. Suffering is the feeling of hatred towards oneself. List all the things about yourself you have ever judged or hated. Next question. I'll repeat that one again. Suffering is the feeling of hatred towards oneself. List all the things about yourself you have ever judged or hated. Next question. Suffering is jealousy and envy. Make a list of everyone and everything you have ever envied. Next question. Suffering is feeling less than, inferior to, or beneath others. I hate that. Oh my God, I hate that. Suffering is feeling less than, inferior to, or beneath others. List the ways you have felt less than. The reason I hate that is because it hurts so much, because most of the time it was really mean people. I mean, I'd be having a good day and then all of a sudden somebody just shit on my parade, and then it'd be like judgment, judgment, judgment. And I was like, I was fine. What? I was happy before you walked up. So that question again. Suffering is feeling less than, inferior to, or beneath others. List the ways you have ever felt less than. Next question. Suffering is feeling superior, better than, or above others. List the ways you have felt superior. Next question. Suffering is greedy, needy, and selfish. That was hard for me to realize. In victim mode, that neediness was really selfish of me. That was hard to look at. Suffering is greedy, needy, and selfish. List how being greedy, needy, and selfish has affected your life and relationships. Hard one, guys. Next one. Suffering is the thought that I cannot be happy until I get ... What are some of the things you think you need to be happy? Probably don't need them. But anyway, suffering is the thought that I cannot be happy until I get ... What are some of the things you think you need to be happy? Next question. Suffering is the anguish and misery of being addicted. What other forms of misery did your addiction create? How did it affect your sexuality, your finances, your looks? I'm going to repeat that one. Suffering is the anguish and misery of being addicted. What other forms of misery did your addiction create? How did it affect your sexuality, your finances, your looks? My hair went from being really thick to not thick. Let's see. Suffering is greed, hatred, and delusion. Delusion. In all its many manifestations. How else have you suffered? Question mark. So I'll repeat that again. Suffering is greed, hatred, and delusion. 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 In all its many manifestations. How else have you suffered? Next question. List the ways you put yourself or someone else in physical danger because of your addiction. Next question. List any grief or trauma in your life that has fueled your addiction. That's what I was talking about in the beginning. And then I guess after. So list all the grief or trauma in your life that has fueled your addiction. And I know this is going to be the hardest thing for a lot of people. When you bring that grief and trauma up, honor it for minutes at a time. Literally tell yourself, I'm going to let this shit come up and I'm going to honor it. And if I have to cry or get angry or go slightly into victim mode or full on, I will maybe, but I will only do it for X amount of minutes. And then get yourself the hell out of that victimization bubble. Don't get stuck in that bubble. Don't. I know. It'll be very hard for some of you. But allow yourself a few minutes. Write it down. I will allow myself X amount of minutes to feel this. Then I will go take a walk. I will go drink some water. I will go meditate, swing on a hammock, whatever. Go watch some funny things on TV or put on some comedy, I should say, on YouTube or whatever. And then walk away from that shit. Don't get stuck in it. Don't get stuck in it. Remember all the times I got stuck in it, so that's why I'm hoping that somebody will listen to this part and remember to limit it to a few minutes at a time. List the ways you put yourself or someone else in physical danger because of your addiction. We already read that. Okay, the trauma. There you go. List any grief or trauma in your life that has fueled your addiction. How have you suffered physically is the next question. Be very hard for some of us. How have you suffered physically? List any other emotional suffering you have experienced as a result of addiction. So that's specific to the actual addiction. List any other emotional suffering you have experienced as a result of addiction. The next question is, list the things that have disappeared from your life due to your addiction. Let me count the ways. Next question. List any misfortunes you have experienced because of your addiction. Next question is, list any missed opportunities. Those hurt, don't they? List any missed opportunities or failures. Michael Tennant. I will forever owe him a set. It's a set for theater. I owed him a set, and it was my first big failure due to addiction was the Scrooge set. List any missed opportunities or failures in your life that were due to your addiction. I guess that one still hurts. Anyway, list the ways in which your addiction has made your life different from the way you want it or intended it to be. I don't know why I have a shit-eating grin on my face, but list the ways in which your addiction has made your life different from the way you want it or intended it to be. And I'm going to pick up with the rest of the questions later because this is nearing 30 minutes. So I love you guys, and we will pick up with the rest of these questions and move on to the next chapter later. Okay, bye.